So I decided I was going to talk a bit about Saturn return, particularly a bit about my Saturn return and how it has related to the Saturn return of others that I have heard. So, the Saturn return stories I've heard, a lot of them make them sound out to be, they're really good or they actually ended up benefiting them. And, a lot of them, they were pretty honest about it. It ended up really sucking. Now, for me, I'm gonna say that, yeah, there were a lot of setbacks. I did experience a lot of major losses in many ways. And I could relate much to Frederick Xavier's talk about his Saturn return. In fact, I can relate a lot to Frederick Xavier in many ways. Well, because one, my ascendant is fairly close to his. And, well, there's also the fact that, we both did a lot of dumb shit when we were younger. I'm just saying, we both did. Now, mind you, we ended up in very different places. You know, I mean, we did. So, with that being said, he mentions how during his Saturn return he had suffered a pretty bad injury, in which I had experienced something very similar with my health. And that health problem ended up costing me a lot of money in so many ways. I mean, for one, there was just the cost of, trying to take care of it, which at first was, quite literally tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, it would have been at least a couple $1,000s every single month from just, the nonstop, buying medications and supplements and going to see doctors and everyone else. And then half the time I just ended up having to toss them anyways because they didn't work or they ended up making things worse. Then there, of course, was the fact that, I just couldn't work as well. It affected my ability to work, which, things very, very quickly just kind of compounded upon each other. Now, don't get me wrong, I have managed to recover from that a lot, and I have managed to make a lot of major gains during that time being, especially when a lot of other people that had the same experience as me, well, they were never really able to recover. They ended up just getting way and way worse over the years. And for me, I was pretty lucky in that regard. And part of that was because of my prior knowledge and what I knew. Now, during my Saturn return, the main thing that really, really screwed me over, that I paid for dearly, was violating a covenant. And this is a covenant that I had made well prior to my Saturn return. This was all the way back in 2013, 2012. It was before I did a lot of things in my life. So, long story short, things have been pretty bad before. I mean, I've had my ups and downs before that time. I've even had some, near-death experiences during, those prior years. In fact, that was even during my Jupiter return. I say prior to my Jupiter return that I had experienced some rather bad stuff. And while experiencing said bad stuff, they were temporary. And I managed to end up doing very well afterwards. I mean, it was literally after a year that, you know, I ended up actually making a lot of major gains, like the following 2 years. And well, as regards to my those events, it was more of just hopelessness and a bad attitude. I was desperate and I was really desperate at the time. And then, I made some really bad decisions, mainly just out of desperation. Not so much because, I just, I was desperate. I did what I had to do and I'm desperate. So then comes Jupiter return, and I'm making massive gains in multiple areas of life. I'm, gaining all this new knowledge, and I'm, studying all these new practices that I've never heard of before, and learning all these new systems. And did I mention I was making a lot of money? My health was actually doing really well. I was in the best shape of my life, physically, emotionally, mentally, and, spiritually. I mean, I also had a good sex life and, enjoyed, hanging out with friends and all that. Well, fast forward a couple years, well, not even a couple years, and there was a situation in which I let my emotions get ahead of me and I began to take things personally. Well, long story short, something happened that kind of really, really irritated me. And lo and behold, I took it really personally. And I let my emotions get ahead of me. And, well, for one, I was trying to save this newfound, I guess, passion of mine, and thinking that somehow if I could do something and, I kind of got a bit physical. I'm trying to leave out the details. That somehow I could leave this old covenant behind and pursue this new life with this new person and this new career and yada, yada, yada. Didn't happen. And it's all because, well, I made a prior covenant before that, in which in said covenant, I made that covenant out of desperation. And, breaking the covenant, and especially in a way that hurt someone, a close friend that helped me out a lot. When I say helped me out a lot, I'm just going to say that he knew a lot of people and he was good at what he did. So, he knew how to work the system and kind of, I'll just say, get rid of some history, erase some history from a lot of people's timelines. I mean, whatever my feelings were about that person all those years ago, I mean, he did, he did what he did and he did it very well. So, after that little debacle in which I paid very dearly for, I mean, I have recovered, but even then, I still have those lingering side effects. Just like, I think Frater mentioned how he got an injury from some kind of accident at work, in which, I mean, mind you, he still has a lot of pain in his back and knees, and from, what I've heard of. I mean, I don't know the guy personally, I've never met him. And as for me, well, I've had a very similar situation. And even though I've recovered and made some major progress during the time of recovery, in fact, I had actually about 5 major wins wins more worth more than money, worth more than all the money in the world. And mind you, money is just a measure of energy. But yeah, I can say that there was a massive amount of manifestations going on during those few years. And you know, after my recovery, well, I mean, a lot of those things are still lingering, and I can't get the time back from, my screw ups. So, well, there it is. Lesson learned. Happy New Year's.